probably the first thing to get on the table is the reason we're here is because of FNAF. Like, if we hadn't watched the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, we never would have talked about Josh Hutcherson and how terrible that movie is, and we never would have seen that
Yeah.
initial entry to the Josh Hutcherson extended universe, um,
Yeah.
which, I mean, I have contemplated going back to see FNAF again just to talk about how awful it is,
Uh,
because it doesn't function on really any level.
no, it's
it's
it's the worst thing ever.
it's pretty terrible. Um,
Yeah.
but what it did do is it made me go, oh, I've seen Josh Hutcherson in other things. I seen him in The Hunger Games, those films I watched like 10 years ago.
Mm.
And then, we both bonded over the fact that we'd only ever seen the first one, and I'd seen the first hour of the second one, which I remembered to be boring, but that turned out to be one of those bad opinions you have when you're 13. And we rewatched them, and I really liked them.
Yeah, I'm quite lukewarm on them. I think the young adultness gets in the way a little bit for me. Like I appreciate sort of like a lot of the I think like you, a lot of the non-Hunger Games stuff, especially after the first movie. But those last two I just didn't care. Like what's it called? Mockingjay.
Yeah,
I
Mockingjay.
I didn't care at all.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting, right? Because I actually quite liked Mockingjay Part 1. I thought
mhm.
it really engaged me throughout the whole film, and I was really ready to get into the second part. And I just think that the second part let down what could have been a very interesting trilogy about revolution. But, those themes are very paper thin. They don't
Mm.
really have. It's not really a comment on pretty much anything other than the fact that reality TV is bad, and revolution is a thing that can happen when you are an autocrat, I guess, and you're
Yeah.
an authoritarian. There's not really any commentary. But what I would say is that with that first half of the second movie, and the first movie, I suppose, as well, but especially that first half of the second film, the world building really drew me in much more so than the love triangle, because that is there.
Mm.
That's definitely
Yeah.
present, and it feels
Yeah.
like in the books that would be a much more core element of this series. But when you compare it to something else like Twilight, which is very much the same vein, those
Mm.
films are terrible, and I don't think there's really no effort at all to world build. I know we go to like Italy and places, and we did watch those movies together, but I don't think you've
Yeah.
remembered anything about them.
Apart from the werewolf being a bit of a interesting guy,
Yeah,
with some
yeah, in the
interesting
last film,
uh
sexually attracted to a
ideas about
child or something like that.
yeah, imprints on them or
But
whatever.
despite that, and despite there being attempts at world building, I didn't really care about that world and Rio and all that
Mm.
stuff. But I was really deeply invested in the love triangle, like absurdly so. I was not
Mm.
expecting to get that invested in those characters, but I really did. And it's like the total opposite of that in the Hunger Games. It was, I'm really into the world. This love triangle is here, but again,
Yeah.
we don't take
Yeah.
any time to explore the relationships between Katniss and Peter, and Katniss and
Mm.
the other one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know his name.
No.
So we watched
Uh,
those, and I had a great time actually. Generally speaking, I do think that the ending is a bit. It's whatever, isn't it? There's not really anything to say about it. It's not like
yeah.
I could go, oh,
Yeah.
this could have been improved by changing this plot event. It's mainly that, again, there's no comment, so you'd have to like change what the series is about.
Mm.
But other than that, I really enjoyed it. I do think the thing that we have to sort of say that we both really didn't like about it in that second film was the first half is great because there's all this world building and there's all this stuff about the uprisings in the districts after the result of the first Hunger Games. And
Mm.
then the second half of the movie, or maybe even the second, like the last 2/3, like what could be the majority of the film, is just another Hunger Games. And it felt really off to be pulled in by the world building and then have to go to like this crazy jungle where
Yeah,
which
with
is totally
monkeys and
exterior from the world. Like it's not connected
yeah, it's not.
whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's also really dumb because it only operates as a plot device to get Katniss out of the games and in and out of
And
like
into rebel
yeah,
hands.
into
Yeah.
the rebellion, which we never established and we could have done if we
No.
didn't do this extra Hunger Games film.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that that's probably in the books. So you can't change that in a
Mm.
movie adaptation. I understand, but it's just one of those things that I really didn't like about that movie. So we haven't conferred after watching the A Song of Ice
Song
and
of Ice and
Fire,
Fire.
whatever the really cumbersome title of this film is, Hunger
Yeah.
Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I hope
Mm.
you understood all the metaphors to do with snakes and songbirds.
There sure were snakes, and that one character
That.
sure is called a songbird.
So, what did you think
Um,
about this film?
I I think I'm hyper negative about it. I really don't
That's
care at all.
fantastic because I really
I
liked it.
really, oh
Yes, I thought it
no.
was great.
Um, I think I think partially it's because I'm not as into the world as into the Hunger
Sure.
Games, so I'm not that interested in Snow's backstory, like whereas maybe another villain I would be. Um, but I also think that it's still a load of bollocks anyway, like a lot of it. So that's my
Right.
general
Well,
overall thoughts.
yeah. I suppose I'll explain that I went into this with no expectations really whatsoever. I knew it was based on a book, so we weren't in Fantastic Beasts territory where there's
Hmm.
no source material. But when I looked up the source material on Wikipedia, it just said, and I quote, "The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes has received negative reviews." I didn't bother reading on anymore because why would you need to?
Right.
So I
Hmm.
went into this being like, there's no reason for this to exist. I'm not gonna like this, and I was proved wrong. I really liked it.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I think probably um, I'll give a spoiler-free synopsis. I think to start with about what the film is, and then we'll jump into spoilers. So, Coriolanus Snow, he's from a poor family. Well, not like really poor, but he's not district poor. But compared to other families in the capital, he doesn't have as much money. And the reason for this was because during the uprisings of the districts, Coriolanus's father was killed, so they lost all the wealth and the power. And Coriolanus sees it as his job to restore his family back to the upper echelons of capital society. And there's this thing called the Plinth Prize that Snow is basically going to win because it's based on academic performance. And if he wins the prize, he gets money which he can use to pay for his tuition to go to university. And even from the beginning of the film, he has ambitions to be president of Panem, which I thought was interesting.
Hmm.
But that's
Hmm.
established that he wants to be president basically from the beginning. But when he turns up, is it Peter Dinklage or Viola Davis? One of them is like, sorry guys, we're not giving out the Plinth Prize this year based on academic performance. Instead, all you Plinth Prize candidates will have to be mentors to tributes in the next Hunger Games because there's a
People aren't
problem.
watching them.
Yeah, much like in the real world, no one wants to watch the Hunger Games. So, the capital people are trying to come up with new ways to get people to be actively watching the Hunger Games. And Coriolanus Snow gets paired up with Lucy Gray Baird, played by Rachel Zegler, who you might know from West Side Story, which I didn't watch. I've seen her in
Or
Shazam.
controversy about Snow White casting
Yes, I mean she's more famous for being in that film that isn't out yet.
that isn't
Uh,
going to be out for another 2 years.
no, but it hasn't stopped Daily Wire from making their version of the movie,
Yeah,
starring our
yeah,
favorite actress Brett Cooper.
absolutely.
I don't know how Daily Wire get around the copyright issues of using the brand of Snow White.
I guess because it's a grim fairy tale, right? So it's just a
Ah,
public
it's not
domain.
Disney's. Okay. Anyway, it doesn't
No.
matter. So yeah, Snow has to mentor Rachel Zegler and he doesn't have to get her to win to get his prize. That's only one of the criteria. He just has to get people watching the Hunger Games. So he finds out the best way to do that is to get the people to know Lucy Gray more personally. So it's really about the birth of the reality TV aspect of the Hunger Games, and that's the premise for the first film that's in this movie. So shall we do spoilers?
Yeah,
Snow
absolutely.
definitely shoots her and she dies for sure. Like, there's no ambiguity, right? Like, he
Yeah, yeah.
definitely kills her.
Well, yeah, and it wouldn't. I don't know what it would add. Like it's not important that she lives for
No,
the mainline trilogy at all. So it's like you just add in some ambiguity for some reason. I guess
it's
because he's
probably
so delusional
yeah
and
for the readers, isn't it? Like, you see this a lot
yeah,
with like really obsessive fan bases. Is that a lot of things are left open ended so that Wattpad fictions can
people
be
can
written
keep
about it.
talking about it. Yeah,
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 and maybe she's out there one day, and then Snow in the 64 years between this film and the originals they met or something. I don't know. Um, I suppose we've jumped ahead a bit there to the end,
the
but
very end.
yeah, I suppose a question I always ask about a prequel is, can you watch this with no prior knowledge, and are you supposed to? Um, I think that this is supposed to be accessible, and I think for the most
Yeah,
part
I
it
agree.
is.
Yeah,
So that's good. But I the thing that I have to say about this is I think I found the love story much more engaging than anything in the originals. We already said about how I can't even remember the name of one of them, but
right.
I thought that this love story, despite perhaps seeming a little bit forced at the beginning, where they do the kiss between the bars of the
Hmm.
zoo, I think that it works really well for me, and yeah, I just had I've really enjoyed it and got really invested in the relationship between those characters, and the conflict that Coriolanus faces feels really like real. I really liked it because he does have to make a choice. He has to choose between her or helping his family, which is, I guess, what the last film in this movie is about. I guess we'll get onto the runtime a bit later.
Hmm.
But whereas Katniss basically never has to make any choices in the Hunger
No, it's all
Games.
made for her
Yeah,
conveniently. She never has to
exactly.
kill an innocent person in the Hunger Games.
No, and especially when
Yeah,
you're talking about revolution as well, it's not like she has to like decide to do anything to get people onto her side. That's all
yeah,
managed by
yeah.
Coin and the other guy. I forget their names. They've all got
Mm.
incredible fantasy names like Haymitch, names that are
Yeah,
names, but they're not quite names. Yeah, I also found that the class emphasis in this film was much greater than it was in anything that we saw previously, which was great because if that's one of the problems with those movies, like we said with the world building, is that it it's just not very clear what the messaging is, and we're aware that sure there's a power disparity between the people like Snow in the capital and the people in the districts, but we don't really get a great idea of the social attitudes from these films. Even when we start talking to people in the rebellion, it's just like we got to do this because we got to be free. But people aren't talking about how they're disgusted with the way people conduct themselves in the capital. But in this
mhm,
film, the class emphasis is very present. People are talking about the districts and the people who are in the districts as savages, and there's this really great divide which is really clear on screen, and I think that's really obvious because when you put those mentors from the capital with the people from the districts, you can't help but see that difference, and I thought that was really
right.
great, and that really helped
Hmm.
with the themes of this movie. I also thought that there was a much greater emphasis on hunger. So whereas I think in the originals the only reference to it being the Hunger Games is that there's like food credits and that's to do with you being nominated as tribute or whatever. But apart from that, the theme of hunger doesn't really exist. But in this film, there's a constant discussion about people are starving, people don't have food. The very first thing in the film is someone
Very
finding,
Linus and
yeah, exactly, someone
yeah,
finding a
searching
dead
through
body,
bins.
yeah,
Mm.
looking because he's
Um,
gonna eat
yeah,
him
yeah.
for food. And so I thought that the that helps because that plays into the class disparity and the class divide, right?
Hmm.
But I really liked that because that also plays into the meaning of the Hunger Games, which is a very core question surrounding this movie, and its significance, and that's really good. So I thought that was much more tight in terms of its subject matter and themes. What do you think of the Hunger Games itself?
Um, ooh,
Because there's less tech, right? That was one of our gripes with the
yeah,
originals. Was like, oh,
the mutts and the
mm,
hacker jackers or whatever,
yeah,
and
wouldn't
like,
it be more interesting if they were just fighting each other
yeah,
and they didn't have
and
to introduce a storm that eats you and stuff, and it sort of takes the excitement out of it.
hmm yeah, I guess it probably is the best Hunger Game out of all of them because um, it is uh, it's like it's like a Colosseum match, free
Yeah.
for all. Like this is ancient Rome, decadence and everything playing into that aspect. Um, like the only thing that gives Rachel Ziegler a little bit of a chance is the fact that there's a random or a chance attack on the building, so that it all starts to crumble and
Yeah.
little cracks and little escape routes and hidey holes are generated.
Yeah, I really
And
liked that. I liked especially when you
yeah,
had there were these big stones that had fallen in such a way that they had sort of propped up another stone, and that becomes a whole set piece where someone is now at the top of the stones, people are trying to climb up, and now that someone's got a height advantage, and it was
mm,
those things that I really liked. I really liked the way that those things had become action set pieces in the way that you can't really get in the originals because oh, you need to kill someone, let's just create a big dog out of the ground.
yeah, yeah. And I think the whole like rickety old drone things that come in,
The
like that's a
tactical
really
water
creative.
strikes.
That's a really creative use of of that system. Makes sense. Like we're in a sort of post-war austerity kind of thing, and it's like this is old tech that halfway works, and
Yeah.
it's not all ironed out. These are all new ideas that are being put into the games, and using it as a weapon is real interesting.
Yeah, well,
I
I'll get
think
into
the
the technology and the setting because I've got some stuff I want to talk about, like generally with the difference between these movies, the old movies, and this movie in terms of tech. Um,
hmm
I think when we had that bit where the Colosseum got blown up by the rebels, and
hmm
she saved Coriolanus, she shouldn't have done that because like right if you think about it right if she saved him then he wouldn't be around and then the Hunger Games would probably stop like it's like saving a
yeah,
Stalin.
hmm
I was just
yeah.
thinking like if you didn't save him you would have died sure but then the Hunger Games probably would have ended because no one wants to watch it. So I just
Yeah.
thought that was really interesting that actually the entire existence of the Hunger Games that moment is quite pivotal for the entire thing. The reality TV aspect is very interesting. I suppose I'll get into that. What do you think about the extremely specific snake trap that is engineered?
Um, well, I I don't the the way that it's introduced as like um in the lab, and she just whatever her name is, I don't remember. Crane, is that her
I
name?
don't know her name.
Um, Scientist lady, master or whatever is
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, I'm just for fun, I'm gonna rip up your essay, throw it into the snake pit, into the snake vat, just to see if you're gonna lie about who wrote it.
Yeah.
And then, girl is bitten and never comes back, so could be dead or might not be. I'm not sure. It
Yeah,
might have
we
been
weren't
said.
really sure what if the
Hmm
snakes were poisonous, if they like kill you instantly, or if there was a cure for those for whatever venom was in those snakes.
Yeah.
So I don't really get it
Um,
because in that scene, right, where you've got this vat of snakes, and then Coriolanus is like, "Oh, I've written all these notes," and then the classmate takes credit for it. And it's like, well, if your DNA is like detected by the snakes on this paper, then they won't kill
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
But why is that facility needed, right? Because if you think about what the snakes are used for, you just dump them in the Colosseum and they eat everyone.
Yeah.
That's the plan from the beginning of creating those snakes. So why do
Mm.
you need a facility that like means, oh, if you put like your handkerchief in it, they won't kill you? Because if the plan is to make that scalable as well, like, oh, they'll only kill the people from the districts, you're gonna need handkerchiefs from every single person in the capital. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand really why it existed if I was being, charitable. But the obvious reason is that we need a way for everyone else to die and then Rachel Zegler to not. So that's the real
Yeah.
reason. So I don't think that works. I do think that is stupid. You also don't need it. Like, there's no. Why do you need
Hmm.
the snakes? Instead of just going in there and shooting them. Like, it doesn't change anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, I I guess as a spectacle, but it's like, mm,
Yeah. Well, that's okay. That was actually the point I forgot to raise. I think that the introduction of the reality TV aspect in this might make or justify at least the use of technology in the games in the later films, because
hmm
saying that oh, I didn't really like this, I didn't really understand why there's baboons and stuff in there. If we understand that there was once a time when these games may have died out because people weren't watching them, it becomes really
hmm
interesting when you consider that they have to keep adding technology to keep people interested. So seeing this, like a more primitive games that only has like a few bits of technology implemented for the first time, makes me understand why they have like Fortnite storms and baboons, because
Yeah.
that's like taking it to the nth degree. If anything, it's showing just how barbaric the games are, that they have to like have all these extra distractions just to keep people watching. So in a way, it kind of justified the thing that I didn't like about it, but it's not enough for me to overlook the baboon fight. I'm still not going to forgive that, or the
Yeah. Yeah.
the spinning
Yeah.
clock map. I just don't think that these things are useful or interesting in that film anyway. But it did
Yeah.
it did help a little bit with the sort of understanding the world, which was nice. I
Yeah.
guess speak. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do you think it makes any sense that this is the 11th or 10th or 12th or whatever Hunger Games, and the rest of them apparently haven't had an announcer or a person
No,
commentating over it?
to be
Like,
honest, it doesn't matter that it's the 10th. This could be the
hmm
2nd, right? Like, it doesn't
hmm
change anything really, other than I suppose that you have to have the characters be old enough to be mentors, and they were kids um in the
the war.
revolution. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't change anything. It's like I said, it's basically a plot device.
hmm
So it doesn't. I don't think it. I think that is stupid. Although speaking of like the man talking over it, the Stanley Tucci replacement. I don't know who
Yeah.
that guy is played by, but he's great. I enjoyed him throughout this whole thing. He's
Yeah, I
hamming
thought
it
it was
up.
alright.
He just doesn't care about anything. He's got a magic coin flip that he does all the time.
Yeah.
He's because is he being broadcast like his he is on camera because
He's on
he does
camera,
the
yeah.
he releases seagulls into the room or whatever it or doves into the
Hmm.
room when
Yeah.
she wins the games, which I thought was really strange. Like, what was he gonna do if when presumably they all died? Like, release a bunch of dead doves.
Yeah. I think I think I like the detail that he probably has little to no faith in the games being successful as well, by
Mm.
the fact that he's so nonchalantly also just doing a weather report like at the
Yeah,
same time, or like
with the
while there's a
stupid
little
Panem
intermission.
map.
Yeah.
I
Which
did notice
includes
that.
Mexico seemingly
Yeah, for
in this one.
why? It doesn't make sense. That map is so stupid. I think we already discussed
Mm,
it, but just have the map be a pizza.
yeah. Yeah.
It's far better. You don't start when
hmm
you start dividing it up into American states, you end up with really weird accent problems. Is that something we should talk
hmm
about? The fact that everyone in District 12 in this movie has a southern accent, but in the later films they
That
don't.
they're just in like general American. Yeah,
Yeah.
that.
Again, it doesn't
um,
make sense. Let's not pretend
no.
like it should. Because obviously that map, as we found out, that map is not used in the book. So this is just like
No.
this is a movie invention. Um,
Hmm.
Speaking of the snakes, what did you think of Viola Davis being really camp and hamming it up? Do you think she fit in this
Uh,
movie?
which one's that? I'm
She's the
sorry.
game maker. She's got like one eye, and she
Oh,
made the snakes.
um, the like sci-fi mad
Yeah,
genius
I have
person.
some IMDB trivia on her. I found some trivia on how she
Right.
got the role, which sounds exciting, and then I'll gradually reveal more information about it, which will make it less and less exciting until it becomes nothing but information. So we'll get to that, which will be
Hmm.
good fun. Um, yeah, the runtime. Right. So basically, Rachel Zegler survives the games because people can't bear to see her die. Kind of similar to the first Hunger Games, but different enough for me to
Yeah.
not. Because my main concern was that, oh, if Katniss breaking out of the system once was enough to make the whole thing crumble, then how are we supposed to believe that there was never any resistance in the games before? And I think this movie does a good job at explaining that because you actually see one of the tributes in the games. He rips down a flag and then puts it over the dead tributes, and it's like, well, that's clearly an act of defiance. But the way they deal with that, if they just kill him, he's just dead in the games now. So
Yeah.
in a way, it kind of explains to me why there wasn't any previous uprising before Katniss, because she actually, like, they both survived. They couldn't just kill her. So that does
Hmm.
actually explain that. Although makes you wonder why people didn't just do a suicide pact in the 70 years prior. But
Hmm.
it's an explanation, which is fine. Um,
Hmm.
but when I went into this film, based on what I'd seen in the trailer, I assumed that once Rachel Zegler survives the games, I don't know, she might get shot or Coriolanus might get exiled or something, and that would be like the end of the film. And that was it. That was the movie I expected to watch. But there's actually an extra movie at the end of this,
Yeah.
which is that Coriolanus gets exiled to being a peacekeeper in, I think, what is going to be District
He's
2
sent
or
to.
8.
He's meant to go to 8, and but he bribes to go to 12, and then later he's meant to go to like officer training in 2.
Yeah. So I mean, again, he does sort of has this sort of will he won't he with Rachel Zegler versus becoming the president of Panem basically,
Hmm.
and I do think that gets a bit tedious in the end of the film because it's just like,
Hmm.
make your fucking mind up. Are you
Yeah.
going or are you not?
Yeah.
Because it's not really clear where his mind is at any point. But he becomes a peacekeeper, and I think that adding this extra movie on does mess with the pacing quite a lot.
Yeah.
Because I think
I
it I think
can
it
I
does
can agree.
slow down quite significantly, and it's like I've already been watching this for 2 hours, and I think that this is a problem only because of my original point with the first Hunger Games, which is like, oh, I'm interested in the world, and I would be more interested in these characters if you gave me more time with them. So my suggestion was this should have been a TV show. That was what I said.
Yeah, I actually agree with that because like it is the longest novel out of all of
Mm,
them by like a margin of over 100 pages, and I think you can. It would also make for me. It would make Coriolanus's um, back and forth and decision more drawn out, more detailed. You could put
yeah.
more in there. Whereas in the actual movie, it's just like at the end, he's like, "Oh, no more loose ends," and that's kind
Yeah.
of it.
Well, we drew when we were watching it quite well. At least I did. Drew a lot of comparisons between this and Game of Thrones, in that you have one event that happens in like the first movie or the first season that triggers an entire chain of events. It's
Hmm.
kind of undermined by the second Hunger Games happening, but the idea is that you have this one Hunger Games that causes an entire revolution that actually topples all of government, even
Yeah.
including the government that comes in to replace the previous one.
Mm.
So I like the idea of this one event being so impactful that it triggers an entire chain of events. And I think that a TV show really lends itself to that. Because could you imagine trying to tell Game of Thrones in a movie franchise?
Yeah,
It would be a
no,
mess. And
absolutely.
I think that kind of happened with the Hunger Games. I think if we'd have had a TV show where we sort of embellish things and we really explore characters a bit deeper, it would be much more engaging.
Hmm.
And I think I'm kind of vindicated by this movie existing because I think that this basically proves my point. It's much more drawn out, but it's got like a lot more stuff in here that really adds to the originals. And I think if you just had like more time to explore the class themes and the themes of separation and the sort of the divides between the different districts and understanding really like what are these different places, because they all have different jobs or whatever and they all provide different things to the capital, but we only ever
Yeah.
see District 12.
Hmm.
And whenever there's a rebellious breakout character, they're always from District 12.
Mm.
And this idea really lends itself to a sort of a Song of Ice and Fire style history. Like, it really lends itself to having a Fire and Blood book.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think there's a lot of lore that you could explore, and this is basically that. This is like the House of the Dragon, basically, of your Game of Thrones.
Hmm.
But I think I liked the story overall, but it did start to drag towards the end. I mean, again, I was nowhere near as invested in the events in the last 40 minutes as I was in the rest of the film, because I didn't really understand where Coriolanus was at in his headspace, because he's going out
Mm.
with Lucy Gray, but he's also not. He's talking to his sister on that circular telephone, and he's
Yeah.
being friends with the pro-Palestine kid, but he's also not. He's
You
also ratting him
recognized
out and
him.
executing him. And
Yeah.
sometimes he's killing the daughter of the mayor, and sometimes he's being a law-abiding citizen and just wants to live in the woods in a shed. It doesn't really make any sense. I couldn't follow
Yeah.
it, and I'm maybe if I saw it again, I would be able to, but I felt that it was too ambiguous for me to follow, which could be a me problem, but I'm gonna blame it on the film. I don't really have anything to say about like that section of the film where we're in District 12, because it wasn't that interesting overall. I did enjoy watching it, but I've just not got a lot to say on it because, like I said, I couldn't
Hmm.
follow it. Um, I guess there are some.
I did, yeah.
Oh,
I
go
did
ahead.
like seeing her in her hometown and on her turf and
Yeah,
how beloved she is and everything. And, I'm not complaining about her singing. So,
yeah, which is
but
probably why she got the role. Let's be let's be
yeah.
honest. How could we forget the references? Um, we got a Mockingjay name drop, didn't we? We're like, oh, what birds are
Oh
those?
God.
They're
Yeah.
Mockingjays, which
We
apparently
call
we
them
have here.
Mockingjays.
Because Katniss doesn't know what
And
they are.
yeah, and we have swamp potatoes, which you can call a Katniss. I like calling them a
Yeah,
Katniss.
we have a very natural Katniss name drop there.
Yeah.
We call them Katniss. It's almost like that name has significance. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
It was quite silly. There was the bit where the Stanley Tucci character says, "Now I don't love your odds, but may they forever be in your favor." You just slipped it in. That's all
Oh,
he's
I
got to
missed
do.
that.
Oh, did you? That's when.
That's the birth of that
No,
phrase?
That's when she's singing and gets all the donations on the TV.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when that happens. He just slips it in. It's like, now I don't love your odds, but may they be ever in your favor, or whatever he says. So
Yeah.
yeah, because in the original films, that phrase is just littered everywhere. It's relentlessly present. You know, the may the odds be ever in your favor, and may the odds be
Hmm.
ever in your favor. May the force be with
Yeah.
you. It was really we had the curtsy. How could we forget the curtsy? Where
Hmm.
she stuck a snake on, again, like the daughter of the guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, not relevant information, but I wrote that down because I thought that'd be important. So I have that in my notes, and I've got to
Yeah.
remind everyone that I remembered that she chucked the snake that she just has, just
Yeah.
has a
It's just
snake.
carrying
I
snakes
don't know what the
about.
metaphorical significance of that snake is,
Yeah.
but
I don't know.
she does it. She sings a song and becomes like a beacon of hope or whatever, and they don't instantly
Mm.
kill all of the people in the audience, which I thought was surprising. Um, and yeah, she does the curtsy, and that's the Katniss curtsy.
Mm.
when she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna shoot an arrow in your apple," or whatever it was.
Yeah, yeah,
I think we also had the origin of the song. I don't know because I don't know the song, right? But we they had that Misty Mountains moment in the Hunger Games. Well,
yeah.
they sing a song and they pay a lot of attention to it in this movie, and I'm like, is that the song? Possibly. So we had a bunch of references in there.
Mm.
If we look in the IMDb trivia, it says there's only 5 entries of trivia. The first one is this movie is a prequel to The Hunger Games 2012, being set 64 years prior in verse. So if you didn't know that, that's in the trivia.
Yeah.
Lucy's curtsy at the ceremony is a nod to Katniss's curtsy in The Hunger Games 2012, according to director Francis Lawrence's Teen Vogue interview. Again, if you didn't notice that, I assume you've never seen a film. And based on the prequel novel of the same title that Suzanne Collins wrote for her Hunger Games trilogy. Again,
Just incredible.
we know this is very deep trivia. Uh,
Yeah.
One of the biggest films to secure an interim agreement from SAG-AFTRA, which meant the actors were allowed to promote the film during the actors' strike. So I guess that's interesting. And the fifth one is, according to director Francis Lawrence, he was convinced to cast Viola Davis to play the villain after seeing a meme online. He said it was a piece of fan art, and somebody had photoshopped, I think, an image of her standing by a window. It may be a still from The Help. It's not a meme, by the way. It's just a movie poster. I'll show you it. But she had this sort
Okay.
of sinister little smile, and they had made mocked up a fake horror poster as if she was a villain in this. I was like,
Oh no.
wow, you know what? She may be really good for this. She has this gravitas, but she could be playful and quirky and get all of that. It'd be very different for her. I don't think we've seen her do this kind of thing a lot. And I'm going to show you the image that made the director cast her in this movie, and it may
Uh,
explain to you why she does that fucking smile all of the time. There it is. That's what it was.
so that's a re so that's an actual movie
I
poster,
think
and
that's an actual movie
like,
poster.
and the director's like, oh, it's a mock-up.
And that's
I
a
haven't done my
meme.
research.
Yeah, he
It's a
told he
meme.
told the media that it's a meme.
Oh no.
So that explains why she's doing that all the time. Um,
Hmm.
IMDb trivia, insane. Um, what did you think of the twist at the end that Peter Dinklage came up with the Hunger Games drunk?
It's just like,
What does that add?
uh, yeah, it doesn't add anything. It's like I made it up, and your dad took credit for it,
Yeah,
just like how your classmate took credit for your thing or something.
yeah.
I don't know.
There's a parallel there because if only there was a rainbow snake pit. that
Yeah.
the person coming up with that was like, "Well, this is your idea, is it, Mr. Snow? Well, I've dropped the Hunger Games in the snake pit, and if you can retrieve it, yeah. If only, wow. So yeah, I
Yeah.
guess that's something, isn't it? And I guess the last thing to talk about in terms of plot is he definitely killed her. Like he shot her. There's no
Yeah.
doubt. Like I know we don't see her, and it's like the only clue is that there's footprints or whatever. But she
And that she
died.
leaves a snake behind when she died, much like a
Yeah, so is he is
Minecraft
he
mob.
hallucinating or yeah, it could have been the snake venom. No, he killed her. He
Yeah.
killed her and she's dead. And that's that. Sorry.
Hmm.
Put that to bed. Um I think the thing I want to talk about that sort of pulled me over the line with this film overall. We've talked about like, how the last third doesn't really engage me, and how there are some plot things that are a bit dumb. Like we have to tie things together. We have to have references. We have to pretend that the Hunger Games is a drunken idea that should never have been made. Like we know it's
Yeah.
bad. You don't have to tell us
Hmm.
that it's a barbaric thing. Like the whole movie is about that. Even though there are these plot things that kind of wind me up, I think ultimately the way this movie looks and the setting really set it apart. So I think with this film, especially if you look at like the fashion styles, you can quite clearly notice a difference. I mean, there's still opulence in the capital, like in the Viola Davis lizard experiment mansion place with all the courts and
Hmm.
the white. You can see that there's opulence in the capital, but it does look a little bit dingy in places. And when you
Yeah,
think
and
of
the
the
buildings
capital,
are a bit are filthy and
yeah,
covered in grime and a little bit disrepair, a little bit like yeah, austerity post-war
yeah, exactly.
sort
The
of thing.
whole film has this sort of 1940s, 50s post-war aesthetic, and
Yeah.
when you think of the capital in the later films, it's very polished, and the room Katniss goes to has like a glass wall, and there's all these
Mm.
maglev trains and things. It's all very smooth and shiny, but in this film, it does feel kind of dingy. It's like being in Joker or something.
Mm.
It's very post-war, and that's mirrored in the way the technology looks, but focusing on like the clothing, for example, when you think of like the dress Elizabeth Banks wears, which is like this crazy anachronistic dress that doesn't look like anything. Like in this
Hmm.
movie, all the women are wearing ball gowns and more traditional dresses that are more period, and the suits the men are wearing are they're darker. They're like pinstripe suits. Again, it's a
Mm.
very specific aesthetic, and what it does show is it shows the progression of the amount of money and the amount of opulence in the capital from this time, only 10 years after the Hunger Games, and then 70 years, which sort of shows the corruption as well, right? Just how much they're taking from the districts, which
Hmm.
I quite liked. I think that really adds to the setting. It gives it like a much more unique feel, right? Like it really separates the chronologies of this
Yeah.
earlier timeline and the later one, which is great.
Mm.
And I guess it's time for a feature called Cool Technology I Noticed in this film. The first one is that circular telephone screen, which I thought was stupid,
Hmm.
that Snow uses to
Hmm.
talk to his family.
Hmm.
There's those birds that can record you speaking and then deliver it back to the Stalinists in the capital, and then
Yeah.
you can listen to your conversations, but only if you hit record on that very cumbersome dial,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
not
It would make an
discreet.
extremely loud clunk as you pressed
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Maybe don't announce all your pro-Palestine rebellion plans when you hear that, or see him. But you got one hand behind your back, Coriolanus. Don't worry
And there's
about it.
Jabba Jays
Yeah, the Jabba
everywhere.
Jay's literally right there. We know exactly what it does because we're peacekeepers as well.
Yeah.
They're not like random birds that we think are just naturally occurring creatures. We know
Yeah,
what they
yeah.
are. We
These are
know,
going to the capital
yeah, they're
in five
caged
minutes.
and ready to go. So
Yeah.
that's great. Um, like the 40s 50s aesthetic, when you see in the control room all the technology, all of the TVs have like rounded screens, and
Yeah.
it's like that very Fallout America in the 50s stuff.
Yeah,
Like even
retrofuturism.
yeah, even the guy has got like the radio microphone that they had from the 30s.
Yeah, yeah.
So the whole thing, it looks dated in a way. Like it's got a very deliberate aesthetic, which I really respect. And I think, like I said, the world building in this movie is what makes it for me. And I really like the love story a lot as well. That's like a bonus if you like. But for me, I think it is the world building, and that's what it is for this entire franchise. I keep coming back to this franchise because I like being in it. Like that's ultimately the
Hmm.
takeaway from it. Um, so, is this movie a thumbs up or a thumbs down, do you think?
Um, uh, gosh.
For me, it's a thumbs
For me,
up.
personally, I'd say it's a thumbs down. I
Okay.
can't be bothered. But I would say obviously people who like are fans of the Hunger Games, it'd be a
Yeah.
thumbs up. Or even if you've not watched the Hunger Games, actually, because I think you could get something out of it. You wouldn't pick up all of the little Easter eggs, quote unquote
Yeah,
Easter
no,
eggs
sure.
that are shouted in your face. Um, uh, yeah, I just think for me the convenience of them like falling for each other so instantly and like Rachel Zegler um is the performances I have no gripes with at all, but um just like what's her name? Lily Gray is like oh, we're both orphans, and that's great.
Mm.
And um, she's just she's introduced as being a little bit of a likable rascal and whatever, but then she gets to the capital and doesn't do anything, like doesn't rebel really, doesn't resent this guy who should represent like everything that has robbed her of everything in her life. Um, I think that bars me from too much enjoyment. But like aesthetically, world building, yeah, there's some stuff in there that is pretty good.
No, I agree with you there. I do think it takes away a lot of her agency to just fall in love with an attractive guy, despite the fact that she's been whisked away from everything that she knows to
Yeah,
die.
yeah,
Like she's not gonna win. Like he doesn't even think she's gonna win. But
no,
she's like, ah, well, he's dreamy, and I'm gonna die anyway, so why
yeah,
not? Which
mm,
I suppose you can justify, but I don't know. It is a bit simplistic, isn't it? Especially when you're meant when you consider the class divide between the two and how strong that resentment is supposed to be.
yeah,
Um, I suppose one more thing to mention that is a positive about this movie is that in the actual Hunger Games itself, I really liked like the brutality and the violence. Like it was way worse than anything we'd ever seen in the first
yeah,
or second Hunger Games. It was quite
yeah,
hard to watch at times, I thought.
yeah. Like when you have that the like poor sick girl who
Yeah.
desperately like crawling up to this bottle of water that's been just poisoned
Poisoned.
and she just falls down and dies. Or the other girl who can climb or something who
Yeah.
just gets swarmed and flooded over by a tsunami of snakes. It's yeah, yeah, I agree with you
Yeah, because
there.
there was the bit where the son of the president had been stitched up, basically,
Hmm.
for his political views, maybe or something wasn't particularly clear, but he'd been stitched up, and his tribute gets tied to the top of one of these fallen rocks. Like no one can get to him. He's basically just hanging there, like he's been crucified,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we just assume that he's already dead before we start. But then it turns out later when one of the tributes goes up to him, he's still alive, and they have to like cut him down, and then he
Mercy
like
killing.
falls on his head or something.
Yeah,
And it's quite they sort of cut away before like you see the crunch or anything, but it's pretty graphic.
yeah.
And there's one of them gets rabies, and it's quite creative, I think, in some respects. Like you don't
Hmm.
like they set up like the bat bite, and I didn't. Maybe I should have seen the rabies coming, but I didn't see it coming. It came as a surprise to me. I thought, oh,
No,
that's
no.
that's clever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was it's probably the best Hunger Games we've actually seen, and I think that is because we had less tech, for sure. I'm not wrong
Yeah.
about that. I feel like
Mm.
this movie's proven me right on my opinions on the actual Hunger Games in the original movies.
Hmm.
I suppose based on your disregard for this movie, you wouldn't want to see another one of these because I wouldn't
Um,
either.
no, I mean, what can you what can you do? I mean, there's 60 years, but unless it's just like, oh, and here's why they added the mutts to the games. Let's have a
Yeah.
another book about that. I would watch if they did like you've said like if they remade it a la HBO doing Harry Potter as um, seasons of television, I'd probably watch it
Yeah.
just for the
No,
hell
I
of
would.
it.
I'd watch a remake of this for sure with more
Yeah,
time and knowing what
yeah,
went wrong with the previous books because I think that it's a bit of an oversimplification to go why is Mockingjay boring because they split the book in half. It's like that's not why. That's boring. The it's not because it took too long. It's because they decided to put like no content in it. That's why.
yeah,
And
yeah.
there's absolutely tons of stuff you can do. And if you take a little bit of creative liberty, I think that this could have been this. I think that explains why this isn't the franchise that it could have been, and
Hmm.
why people didn't go to the cinema to see Mockingjay Part 2 and all that. Having said that, despite the fact that that franchise died off in popularity at the cinema, this seems to be doing very well. We haven't
Doing
got
well,
the
yeah.
numbers yet because it's only Sunday, but it seems to be, Lionsgate's strongest opening of the year, I've heard. But again,
Hmm.
we had to get a Lionsgate Plus free trial through Amazon Prime
Through Amazon Prime.
to watch those films. And we looked on
Yeah.
Lionsgate Plus because we, I don't know, finished them in like 5 days. And then it was like, well, what else is on here? We got 2 days left of this trial. There was nothing on there. Nothing on Lionsgate Plus. I know Lionsgate made the Fred films, but they genuinely had nothing else on there unless you want to watch Endless London stroke Olympus stroke Atlantis
Oh
stroke
God,
whatever
Half
has
Fallen.
fallen. I don't
Yeah.
know how many there are. I've never seen any of them, but I guess unless you want to watch those, there really is no reason to get a Lionsgate Plus subscription if you've seen The Hunger Games. So it's
Hmm.
the highest opening of the year for Lionsgate, and I guess it will continue to do well. And fair enough, actually, because I enjoyed it, but I do think I think that the runtime will be an issue for people. Will this get good word of mouth? I don't really know, because people don't like long runtimes. It takes like a
No.
very exceptional movie for people to go, oh, that's 3 hours and I would go and see that. Like Oppenheimer is one of those
Hmm.
films that people would, but
Hmm.
like Killers of the Flower Moon, I don't know if people would like recommend that because it is long.
Yeah.
And I think that this will have a similar problem in that it's long. Only go and see it if like the Hunger Games. I think that will be the word of mouth for it. But it seems to be doing well at the
Yeah.
moment, and I
Mm.
have a feeling that we will see a sequel to this. Like Coriolanus Snow in the capital, rising as a young political pretender.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll see another one, but I don't want to. I really don't want to. In fact, I
No.
was dubious about the existence of this. It's a surprise to me that it was good and I enjoyed it. But let's
Hmm.
not risk it. Let's not tempt fate. Because we'll end up with a Crimes of Grindelwald. I know this wasn't a Fantastic Beasts, but we will end up there, or Secrets of
Yeah.
Dumbledore,
Yeah.
which I don't think anyone has seen, not even
No.
me. So I am worried that this will create a new spin-off franchise. I don't want
Yeah.
that because I don't think there's enough of a story, to be honest, unless you literally end up leading up to the Hunger Games. We have a limited amount of story we can tell here, and we just run
Yeah.
the risk of getting really convoluted and really self-referential and self-indulgent, and I wouldn't want that. But I want to tell
Mm.
new stories in this world because I think the world is interesting.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that'll do it.